Hey everybody, welcome to the Vault Podcast, where music still matters. You can check us out on social media, on Twitter, at The Vault Music One, and on Facebook, just search The Vault. Today we got an awesome guest with us. I'm super excited to have him. He's the host of the world's smartest wrestling talk show, StraightShoot, and also the creator of the fantasy storytelling series, Skald. Aubrey Sitterson, how's it going today?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Just give everybody a quick background about yourself and everything you've done.
All right, so I'm gonna try and make it as quickly as possible. I've been really fortunate. I've been able to work in some really great companies and sort of like IP creators and stuff like that. So I started off my career in comics. I started immediately after college. I started working as an editor at Marvel Comics. I worked on Ghost Rider, Punisher War Journal, Ant-Man. I worked on the Civil War series, House of M, Captain America, New Avengers, mostly sort of Marvel heroes type stuff. After a few years there, and I was editing my own titles. X Factor was one of those as well. I left and I went to WWE, where I worked at WWE.com, which is another one of my big fixations, right? Comics and wrestling. And so I worked at WWE.com initially as a writer. So I was writing like match previews and reviews and special features and stuff like that. And eventually kind of worked my way up to being a producer on the website. And so I would run coverage for Raw some weeks, but always ECW when it was going on, WWE, ECW, and then NXT, and then Superstars as well. I did that for about 2 years, and then I went freelance, and I started, my goal initially was, and has always been, I want to write comics, and I'm doing that. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit right now. I've got a story out in Hulk number 16, which just came out a couple weeks ago, and June 5th, I believe, is the first Wednesday in June, Strange Sports Stories. I've actually got a wrestling themed story in that coming out from Vertigo. So I did that for a couple of years, working freelance and editing comics and writing for the web and doing wrestling features and lists and stuff like that, and movie news, just whatever, copywriting. And then I moved over to the West Coast. I was living in New York beforehand. I moved out to LA and started working for WWE Games, first at THQ before they went under. And then once they went under, I got brought on board by 2K. 2K, so I was in that position for about 2 years before 2K decided to move the operation up to San Francisco, or just outside it in the Bay Area. I had just moved out to Los Angeles, and I kind of love it out here, and I wasn't really ready to go, and also kind of felt like it was time for something new. I'd worked on the marketing campaign I was doing digital marketing, and so interactive marketing and all the social media stuff and the community stuff and live streams and all kinds of stuff like that for both WWE 13, which is the last THQ title, and WWE 2K14, which is the first 2K title. So that I left 2K in December of 2013. Since then, back to freelance. So some copywriting, some social media consultancy and stuff like that to pay the bills. But what I'm really excited about and working really hard and plugging all the time is, as you mentioned, the StraightShoot podcast, which is a post-Raw and pay-per-view primarily talk show. It's a panel show, and so I get independent wrestlers, people like Roderick Strong and Tommaso Ciampa, Adam Cole. I get metal musicians, which you might be interested in. I've had Phil Landfill Hall from Municipal Waste. I've had Andy Williams from Every Time I Die. It's not metal, but I've had Alex Levine from Gaslight Anthem. Comedians, screenwriters, comics people, all kinds of folks come on and chat wrestling with me after Raw on Monday nights. And more recently, I've started up Skald, which you mentioned also, it's a serialized podcast, but it's all sword and sorcery based. So every week I write about 20 to 30 minutes of this story. I write a chapter of it. It's meant to be read, and then I read it in one take, which is kind of one of the things that takes the most time about it, getting it knocked out in one single take. And so that's been going on for, I think the 10th episode is going up this week, which I'm really excited about as well.
So the one thing you didn't mention is talking about music, and that's why we got you here today. So let's jump right into it.
Let's do it.
What have you been listening to lately?
So, actually just recently, just this week. So a couple weeks ago, I was not this past weekend, the weekend before, I went down to Orange County, because they had, Psycho California,
right,
which previously had been Psycho de Mayo, which was like a 1-day festival. It was mostly like stoner and doom and sludge and psych metal. And this year they expanded it to 3 days. And I went down there for all 3 days. It was amazing. And so I had built up a playlist of all the bands that I wanted to see over the course of the weekend. And there were a ton of them because it was going on for 12 hours every day. So it was a lot of Sleep and Ohm and Pallbearer, Mothership, Lord Dying, Municipal Waste played, which was a weird fit, but I love the Waste. So that was cool. So I was listening to that almost exclusively just because I was trying to get hyped up for this
Right.
festival. Since that ended, my default is kind of doomy, sort of sludgy stoner metal. And I've actually gotten really into Valkyrie, this past week. I guess last week, I think the new album came out. It's excellent. And it's like a couple guys from Baroness, but it's got more, instead of like that Savannah sludge sound, it's got more of kind of like that throwback, like dick swinging hard rock vibe to it.
Yeah, right. So what was your favorite band that played there?
Ooh, I think probably Conan.
All right, so do you want to talk a little bit about just how music has kind of shaped your life, whether it was in comics or wrestling, or maybe neither? Just how has music impacted your life so far?
Well, it's funny, man. I'm a big music fan, and I've always been a big music fan. But I for the life of me, I cannot play music. Like it's always been a really frustrating thing to me. I can't sing. I just don't have the voice for it. I can't hit any notes. I got a tin ear. And like as a kid, I played drums for a while. But it just got to the point where I realized I wasn't very good at it. And I think part of it was just being a shitty little kid not wanting to put the hours in. But like, I think that was definitely part of it. But at the same time, like a few years later, I was like, maybe I'll try bass. Like maybe the drums weren't the thing for me. Maybe I'll try bass. And I got a cheap bass and I was trying to play that. And then a friend of mine, I was taking lessons and stuff. And a friend of mine, I was trying to learn these like blues riffs and things. And then a friend of mine, also decided he was going to play bass, and he didn't take any lessons, but he was able to just listen to a song and then fucking play it after listening to it. And I just threw my hands up. I was like, you know what? This is just not for me. So like, despite the fact that I can't play music to save my life, music has always been a big part of my life, going to shows and, buying and listening to music. Right now, like a lot of my writing, I tend, and this is one of the reasons I like doom and like kind of psych and like stoner and sludge metal so much, is that the lyrics a lot of times aren't the focus. And so it's good background music for when I'm writing and working on other stuff. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I definitely, depending on what I'm writing, writing specific scenes and Skald and stuff. Like if there's a battle scene, I'm putting on Man of War. And if there's like something really creepy and like weird and occult going on, I'm putting on Electric Wizard. And like, so I definitely key what I'm writing and what I'm working on to specific bands and albums,
Yeah. So do you remember the very first piece of music you ever actually purchased or received?
Yeah. So I was thinking about this, and I don't, like, because it's so hard because I was so young. I do remember though, like I got like a stack of cassette tapes from my folks, which were basically just their cassette tapes. And the ones that I remember most clearly, I remember listening to the most was a Beatles disc. And I think it was Hard Day's Night. So I think it was like, it was one of the ones that they had like edited for the American audience. So it wasn't like one of the original Beatles albums. It was like one of the ones that they put together. That, and this one's weird, but I'll explain a little bit more in a second. The Big Chill soundtrack, which I loved as a kid because it was all of this like 60s and 70s, like groovy classic rock stuff. And it was like, this was in the days before, like Spotify and streaming services and things like that. So, having one tape that has all these different bands and all these different songs on it, that was like a massive thing for me.
So what was the first concert you ever attended?
Oh man, I can't tell you that either. But I can tell you this. It was, so where I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, there was this little, punk club. At the time, it was called Twisters. And since then, it's gone through like a dozen different name changes, and it's called Strange Matter now. And it's down like the VCU area, Virginia Commonwealth University in the city of Richmond. And I went to something there because it was like, this is funny. This is so nerdy. There was a IRC. So this is like old school nerd stuff. There was an internet relay chat channel that I participated in, that I was like a really frequent participant in, because originally it had, like, the guy who administered it, he administered an IRC channel for the local alternative rock station, The Buzz in Richmond. And so he administered that, and then they shut it down because they were like, this is stupid. Why are we doing an internet relay chat thing? But I had met all these other like weird, like, teenagers, like from around the state, like wherever the Buzz's, listener radius would hit. And so, they had like a charity function for like the American Cancer Society. This guy had put it together, and I begged. And so I was probably like, I was probably like 14. I begged and begged and begged and begged, to go down there. And so my parents drove me down there and they dropped me off and like made me promise to like, like not drink anything anybody gives me and be careful and all this sort of stuff. Because it's actually a pretty safe area now, but like it used to not be. It was kind of a rough block or two, in that neighborhood. And so I went and I do not remember at all who played because they were just kind of like local shitty hardcore bands. And that was a lot of my my live musical consumption. That was most of it during high school, going to see these punk bands at like house shows or, in like people's basements in these old houses and squats and stuff like that, or this little punk club down in the VCU area.
Even though you don't remember the artist, that's totally awesome. Remembering the stories like that, you've always got something to tell now.
I'll tell you something else too. So, I got home and like I had like so this is the late 90s. So I had really big jeans, like really big jeans.
Yep.
Yeah. And they were cuffed at the bottom, right? Because I was too short for these big jeans that I had. And like, I came home and like, cause there's still, it was the 90s. So there's still smoking in these venues. And I reeked of cigarette smoke. And my mom was like, like, so as soon as I came to the house, she's like, strip down, throw your clothes in the laundry. You smell awful, right? You smell like a cigarette factory. And so I did it. And then I went upstairs to go like take a shower and get ready for bed and stuff. And then like my parents called me down and they were really super serious. And I was like, what's going on? Like I just showered and everything. And they were like, they said, listen, we're not going to be angry, but we need you to be honest with us. We found this in your pants. And like, or like, and pulled out like a roach, right? Like a tiny little roach. And my response was, what is that? Because I had no fucking idea, because I was a 14-year-old internet relay chat nerd, and I had no idea that was a joint. And they believed me, and they're like, oh, it's nothing. Don't worry about it. It fell in the cuff of your pants. Go to bed. It's fine. So yeah, I don't remember what bands played, but I do remember my parents finding a roach in my giant jeans very clearly.
I'm surprised they actually bought that. You saying that you didn't know what it was.
My parents are pretty hip. I feel like if I had told them that, like, if I had like come clean and been like, oh yeah, I was smoking weed, I feel like they probably like would have like given me like a little talking to, but they wouldn't have even been like super. My parents are hip. They're down. They know.
All right, so this next question is a little bit broad, and I'm just going to let you kind of run with it however you want to. But what is your thoughts on the current state of music? Any genre, formats, sales, just anything. Run with it. Yeah.
So I can't speak for the business side of things, right? Because I know I can speak from my experience in terms of content creation and making art and things like that. It's rough to do in 2015, just because content has been devalued so very much, just by virtue of the free economy, and just everybody expects everything to be available for free on the internet. And so it makes it really difficult to convince people to pay for things. And so I know that as much as this affects comic book creators and people who make video content for the internet like I do, I know it also affects musicians and musical artists. So I know that. But that being said, I love the state of music right now. I think it's incredible. I think like and again, like I know that there's I've read a lot of different people's thoughts on things like Spotify and whether it's great for the industry or whether it's bad for the artists or whatever. But as a consumer, I am in love with Spotify. Spotify is like the best $10 that I spend every single month. It's tied with the WWE network. It's amazing. It's so great that I can just pick a band that I've never really spent much time. Like last year I said, you know what? It's time for me to get into Hawkwind. And I did. And then I did, because all of Hawkwind is on there, and I can just plow through it and figure out which albums I like. And it's not like this, it's not a thing where I have to go and like read all these different reviews and talk to these different people and figure out, okay, well, which one of these albums do I want to spend $20 on? Cause that's how I remember it when I was like in high school, because it was a big investment. It was a lot of money. It was like $18 to get an album. So yeah, that's amazing for me as a consumer right now. Additionally, and this is something that's happened sort of across all media, is how niche everything has become, right? I love that I can say, oh yeah. You know what? I love stoner, doom, sludge metal. And that's what I like. And there's enough of it out there to fill my ears all the time. Like it's great. It's so much better than when I was, in high school listening to the Buzz and just kind of like desperate for them to play something that I didn't hate.
Yeah. So I'll still ask you this, but I kind of think I know where you're going to stand on the kind of physical versus digital media. Where do you stand on that?
I love physical media. I do. I mean, I'm looking at my bookshelves full of comics right now, like graphic novels and things like that. But I have, since graduating from college, and I mean, even during college, I was living in dorms and stuff. I live in apartments and I move kind of not infrequently. And it's a pain. I used to have I used to have a big box full of records that were like my grandparents' records and my mom's records and my uncle's records and all this different stuff. And I would lug them around from apartment to apartment, and they weigh, records weigh more than iron. It's insane. Like how heavy these fucking things are. And it's just, I know it sounds better. I like the way a record sounds, but just in terms of convenience, and even more than convenience, just the space that physical media takes up, I can't justify it anymore, especially in regards to music. I've even cut down, I don't really buy physical comics anymore either. I only buy digital stuff just 'cause I'm tired of lugging them around with me places. Every once in a while, if there's something that's like a really nice package, and that's the thing. And I think that's what a lot of, smaller record labels and stuff have figured out now, that if they create something that is kind of like a fetish item, and it's something that people want to have and want to hold and want to display somewhere, that there still is a market for physical media. But yeah, I am very, very much on the digital side of things.
Let me throw a real quick question at you too, since we're talking about this. You were talking about going to the record store as a kid and kind of debating and picking things up. Do you think with the ability of Spotify and all different avenues on the web that you can find out any bands at any time, that sometimes the music or the bands kind of lose a little bit of the mystique?
I do. Absolutely. I mean, and I would add on to that and say that, and this is something I've experienced for sure too, is, so one of the first, so I had cassettes and stuff before that, but the first 2 CDs I ever owned were Blind Melon's self-titled album.
Nice.
And yeah. And here's the thing. And I don't know whether you're making fun of me or not.
No, I actually really like Blind Melon.
Oh, they're dope. They're really, really good. Like everybody knows like the No Rain song, but like, dude, like the rest of the album, it sounds like Axl Rose singing Allman Brothers covers.
Yeah.
It's perfect. It's all kind of like sludgy and like groovy, like southern rock stuff, but like with like the scratchy high pitched voice. I love it. And so there are 2 sides of this, right? As a result of those being my first 2 CDs, there's the only 2 CDs I had, and I didn't want to go back to tapes, right? Cause I had the boombox and the CD player on it. I listened to those things a million. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't tell you the second one. The second one was, Lenny Kravitz, Are You Gonna Go My Way? Right. I listened to those albums a bazillion times, right? I wrote till the fucking wheels fell off of those things. And with Blind Melon, that was great, because to this day, I know that album backwards and forwards, right? With Lenny Kravitz, it sucked because there was only one good song on that album, right? So there was like, which was the title track, right? The rest of it was fucking garbage. So like the sword swings both ways, I guess, in that, I definitely sometimes feel kind of a disconnect, because I can be fickle and I can listen to anything, and I don't have to listen to these same albums over and over again, and you lose a certain intimacy because of that. There are a lot of albums that I grew up, I grew up having, like, feeling very, very near and dear to, if I was in high school today, I don't think I'd have that same experience.
Yeah, I can give you a quick example. Have you ever heard of the band Gizem from Japan?
I don't know Gizem.
It's like a Japanese hardcore with a little bit of metal. Okay. Anyways, I found them when I was in high school, and at the time, the internet wasn't that prevalent. I mean, it was there, but it wasn't like it is today. So I was searching everywhere, and I finally found a crust punk website, a DIY that sold bootlegs. And I remember ordering a tape from there, and then YouTube starts taking off in the mid 2000s. The next thing I know, all their albums are on there, and I just was so deflated.
Yeah, dude. I mean, for sure. I mean, another one of my favorite bands when I was in high school, was John Spencer Blues Explosion. And John Spencer Blues Explosion, by the standards of today, not a terribly obscure band, right? Not at all, really. I mean, like, they're like pretty standard, like mid-sized kind of cult band, right? But in the late 90s, when, the only reason I found out about them is because for a while our cable package got Much Music from Canada.
Oh yeah.
And they would play John Spencer Blues Explosion, like videos. And I saw the one with, like, talking about the blues with, like, John C. Reilly and Winona Ryder and Giovanni Ribisi, like, pretending to be the guys in John Spencer Blues Explosion. Here's the thing. I thought that was John Spencer Blues Explosion. I had no fucking idea, right? I didn't realize, I didn't know who John C. Reilly was when I was in high school. And so, yeah, like, so I had to go down to like the downtown, like, they called it, it was called Plan 9. And it was like our like hip indie record shop place that had a lot of like used albums. And I had to go there to like dig through used albums to find, John Spencer's stuff. And that was like core and crucial to my high school identity, being the kid who was really into this band that nobody else really knew about, but it was like super feedbacky and kind of weird and aggressive. And, yeah. And like now that you could just hop on Spotify and have the entire John Spencer Blues Explosion catalog, it's got to be an entirely different experience for people.
All right, so let's talk about media that isn't on physical, which I think is awesome that it's exclusively digital. There's tons of stuff out there, but let's talk about Skald. When you announced this, I immediately started listening, and it's one of the coolest things I've ever heard.
Oh, thanks, man.
It's not spoken word, and it's not an audiobook. It's something like I've never heard. So just tell us a little bit about Skald.
So Skald came from me wanting to, as I mentioned earlier, like I love comics, and that's one of my favorite mediums to work in. And I really want to do more. I want to continue doing comics. And I've got stuff, I've got irons in the fire. Nothing I can talk about yet.
Right.
But pitches and stuff I'm waiting on. But it's really tough as a writer of comics because unlike writing for television where you can write a teleplay and then send it off to people as a spec. And if it's good, maybe an agent will sign you and then they'll try and get you on a show. And like, there's like a path, right? If you want to write comics, you have to have written comics. So it's like a weird catch-22, right? Which means that you need to find, if you can't draw comics, which I cannot because I'm a terrible artist, you need to find somebody to work with you. And if you don't have a bunch of cash to throw at somebody to make them do something, that means you're asking somebody to work on spec and, share ownership, of course. But, inevitably what happens is somebody gets a better offer, or somebody gets too busy, or their job kicks in, or they just lose interest and want to work on something else. And after having this happen to me like a dozen different times, at least on different projects, I said, you know what? I realized that one of the things that had really made StraightShoot successful and allowed StraightShoot to continue to succeed and grow is the fact that I do it all myself. It's totally DIY. I mean, yes, I have guests and stuff on the show, but I'm the one booking them. I'm the one doing all the tech stuff. I set up the website. I host the show. I research it. I promote it. It's just me. So if something goes wrong, I know it's my fault. I know who's to blame, and I only have myself to blame. Somebody being lazy doesn't really affect me, except for the fact that like sometimes guests will crap out, but I'll just get another one and it's fine. I just keep on plowing ahead. And so I wanted something similar. And so I was trying to figure out what that would be. And I realized that, I can write. I like to think I can at least. And I can talk. I've spent the last year and a half doing at least weekly StraightShoot shows, and it's at least 90 minutes a week. And so I've gotten a lot better at speaking. And so I was like, what can I do that's writing and speaking? And so I sort of stumbled across this, spoken word idea. And initially I thought, I would do maybe like a serial, like a radio serial, but that really quickly became much more complicated than I wanted it to be because I was going to need voices and music and other actors. And again, it was just going to get too complicated. It wasn't just going to be me. So the idea for Skald really came from a place of wanting to be self-sufficient and wanting to do something on my own that was storytelling based, that I could continue doing, without anybody else dragging me down. And so, yeah, it's fantasy based. It's sword and sorcery. So it's very like Robert E. Howard and like Michael Moorcock influence, very violent, kind of weird and trippy and psychedelic at times. But yeah, it's kind of like a big amalgamation of a lot of different things that I love. And I'm having a blast doing it.
And one thing you touched on is DIY, and I think we can tie that back in with music with like the early 80s thrash and the hardcore and punk scenes. And I know we both kind of feel this way. Why do you think it's so important for people to continue to support any way they can independent content?
Oh, because nobody makes any money otherwise. I mean, that's the long and the short of it, right? People.
I guess maybe I should say how it's so hard to convince people, like you said earlier in the show. Everybody just wants everything immediately, and they want it for free. They don't want to give any credit. So
yeah, it's a bummer. I mean, what I would say is that the things you like, it takes time. it takes time to do things well, you know, and whether it's the time to actually create something or all the time that's front loaded into getting to the point where you can create something. Pick your favorite band, whatever it is, right? I love Skeleton Witch, right?
Oh, yeah.
The guys in Skeleton Witch didn't just come out of the womb being able to play like that and write songs like that. It took years, you know? And so like, so when you don't give people money, you're not robbing them of the content that you're stealing. You're also denigrating the time and the work that they put in to create something for you. And so, yeah, I mean, it's crucial that people, support, especially independent artists, and, the smaller and the more independent, the better. And the more they need your support, because they don't have the backing and the infrastructure, that these larger bands do, and these people sign to bigger labels and things like that. And what's more, even the big bands don't have the support and infrastructure that they would have 10 years ago, certainly not 20 years ago. You know, everybody's required in 2015. Everybody, unless you've already made it, right? Unless you're fucking U2, everybody is required to be DIY. Everybody's required to do their own marketing. Everybody's required to do their own PR. Everybody's required to get the word out, and that's just part of the landscape in 2015, for better or for worse.
And I think you're a great example of proof that if you want to do something, you put in the work, you can do it.
Absolutely. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I'm sorry. But yeah, no, I mean, I tell people this all the time, you know, nobody's going to respect your work unless you respect your work first. You know, you just got to put the time in. You got to put that sweat equity. You got to put the blood, sweat, and tears and elbow grease into actually creating stuff and making it good.
So real quick, let's get back into music. We've established this a little bit, but what are your favorite genres and maybe your least favorite genres? You know, we listen to a lot of different music on this show, so just get to your thoughts on that.
Yeah, you know, definitely right now, very much into like doom and like psych and sludge and stoner metal. It's definitely my speed right now, but I have pretty wide ranging interest, man. I listen to a lot of I like the Outlaw Country Station on Sirius.
Oh yeah, that's great stuff.
Oh, it's great. You know, like, I mean, because they do contemporary stuff, but they also do old stuff too. So they'll play I play Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings and Merle Haggard and David Allan Coe and stuff like that. So I've got really, really wide, reaching really broad interest. I don't dislike hip hop music. I just don't know as much about it. And sometimes I find the barrier to entry to be a little high. I just have a hard time kind of wrapping my brain around some of it sometimes. That said, there are hip hop artists that I absolutely love. But they're like the ones that all like white, like long haired rocker guys love. So it's like Kanye and like, Run the Jewels and stuff like that. So I mean, that's kind of like the biggest glaring blind spot in kind of my musical knowledge, but it's not because I don't like it. It's just, there's only so many hours in the day, you know?
Right. Yeah, I totally understand. Hey, real quick, you said you like Outlaw Country. Do you like Sturgill Simpson?
I don't know Sturgill Simpson. I recognize the
gosh.
name, but I don't know his stuff very well.
He's a newer artist that's got that classic sound. It's just fantastic. The lyrical content is not what you'd expect. Definitely check it out.
Okay, very well.
All right, so another question. I would hope to think I'm not the only person that does this, but do you ever jam out to just wrestling theme music since you're in wrestling?
Yeah, I mean, I used to a lot more. I spend so much time watching wrestling now that when I'm not watching wrestling, I kind of like doing stuff that's not wrestling.
Right, yeah, understandable.
But yeah, absolutely. You know, especially some of the older, like 80s and stuff like that. I absolutely love. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so awesome to be like you have your iPod on and you walk around the house and the next thing you hear is like the Repo Man theme come on. You're like, yes!
For sure. I like the Nation of Domination. That's 90s, but I like the Nation of Domination theme a lot too.
Oh yeah, the Razor Ramon actually from the 90s. That's one of my favorites.
Oh yeah.
All right, so last question. This may be hard to pin down, but what are 5 of the most influential artists to you?
So let's go with Creedence Clearwater Revival for sure.
Nice.
Led Zeppelin, definitely. Personally, absolutely John Spencer Blues Explosion. I mentioned them earlier, but I listen to them all the time to this day. I know they have a new album coming out this year, which I'm really excited about. Let's see. I should have prepared a little bit better for this.
It's tough pinning 5 down.
It is. It's tough pinning. I mean, because I can tell you, I could rattle off really easily what are like the 5 right now that are like that are absolutely hitting me the hardest. But Led Zeppelin, CCR, Fuck it. I'm going to say Oasis because I was
Wow, that's a curveball.
I was a huge Oasis fan in the 90s. I was super, super, super into them. And for the fifth one, Electric Wizard. Electric Wizard is right now one of my absolute favorite bands, and they have been for years now. Just because it's kind of like the perfect distillation of a lot of different things that I like, and they're also just like the sludgiest, heaviest, doomiest thing going.
And they're consistent. Like they change a little bit. It's not the same stuff over and over again, but every album's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so we've had an awesome time talking about music and wrestling and comics and all that. So let everybody know where they can find you and what you're up to.
Absolutely. You know, the easiest way to get to find me is AubreySitterson.com. It's AubreySitterson.com. It's got all my social media stuff. Twitter's Aubrey Sitterson, Instagram's Aubrey Sitterson, Facebook Aubrey Sitterson. Every Monday night after Raw, I have, or most every Monday night after Raw, I have like a post show with great guests. I had Excalibur from PWG and Rob Pasbani from Metal Injection on this past Monday. And then next week, I'm actually doing something new. It's called This Week in Wrestling. We're going to be covering not just Raw, not just WWE, but also, New Japan Pro Wrestling and Ring of Honor and some other stuff as well. It's a way to kind of broaden our focus. But all of that stuff is linked up at AubreySitterson.com. And it's the best place to go for links to that, as well as Skald, which a new episode drops every single Thursday.
All right, man. Once again, thanks for coming on. And thanks, everybody, for checking out the show. Until next time, see ya.